As the cold night surrounded me, I was tied tightly to the trunk of an old oak tree, its rough bark pressing into my back. Edward stood in front of me, holding a cricket bat, his face emotionless and cold. My desperate cries for mercy were ignored, even as I pleaded for the safety of my unborn child. He lifted the bat high and swung it forcefully. The first hit struck my arm, causing searing pain, but the second blow landed hard on my head. My vision blurred as I felt the world spinning. Before everything went dark, I heard Edward's chilling voice say, "This is just the beginning, Laura." My name is Laura Jacob, and I'm 35 years old. I've spent over a decade building my career as an investment analyst, navigating high-pressure deals and challenging environments in a male-dominated industry. Every late night, every tough negotiation, and every setback I faced shaped me into the woman I am today, resilient, independent, and determined. After years of hard work, I achieved what I considered my greatest accomplishment, a $5 million dream home in Austin, Texas. To me, it wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary, a reflection of my success, and a legacy I had built with my own hands. Its towering glass windows captured the golden Texan sunsets, and the sprawling backyard boasted an ancient oak tree that seemed to tell stories of its own. Every room was carefully designed to reflect my personality and values, blending modern aesthetics with touches of warmth. Then I met Edward William. Edward was 38, a charismatic software engineer with a quick wit and a knack for making everyone in the room feel at ease. We were introduced at a mutual friend's dinner party, and from the moment he flashed that disarming smile, I was intrigued. His intelligence and charm made every conversation feel like an adventure. Before long, we were inseparable. In Edward, I thought I had found a partner who shared my dreams and ambitions. Our whirlwind romance felt like something out of a storybook, and when he proposed, I didn't hesitate. We celebrated our wedding surrounded by family, friends, and promises of forever. At the time, I believed I had everything I could ever want: love, success, and the perfect partner. Little did I know, the fairy tale would start unraveling the moment we stepped into married life. Edward's mother, Jennifer William, entered our lives like a slow, creeping shadow. At 64, she was a retired college professor, sharp-tongued and opinionated, with an air of entitlement that became evident soon after the wedding. During our courtship, she had been polite and somewhat distant, but her true nature began to surface once the vows were exchanged. The first sign came in the form of subtle criticisms. Jennifer would comment on the decor of the house, dismissing my modern, curated style as cold and uninviting. "This house needs a woman's touch," she remarked one afternoon while running her fingers along my dining table. Her implication was clear: I wasn't that woman. I brushed off her remarks, chalking them up to an adjustment period. After all, she was Edward's mother, and I wanted to maintain peace. But her visits, which had been sporadic, quickly became frequent. Soon, those visits turned into extended stays, and then, without so much as a discussion, Jennifer arrived at the front door with her suitcases in tow. "I'll be staying here for a while," she announced. "Edward needs support, and I can't do that from afar." Her statement left me stunned. Edward and I hadn't discussed this, nor had I agreed to it. I turned to him, hoping he would intervene, but he only shrugged. "She's my mom, Laura," he said, his tone dismissive. "It's just temporary." Temporary, as it turned out, was Jennifer's code word for permanent. Her presence grew suffocating. She scrutinized everything I did, from my career to the way I ran the household. "You work too much," she'd say over breakfast, her tone dripping with judgment. "Edward deserves a wife who's more present." Her words stung, but what hurt even more was Edward's indifference. Whenever I tried to address how her comments and actions were affecting me, he waved it off. "She's just trying to help," he'd say, as though that excused her behavior. One day, I returned home to find the living room unrecognizable. The sleek furniture I had spent months selecting was gone, replaced by heavy, traditional pieces that clashed with the modern design of the house. Jennifer stood in the middle of the room, admiring her handiwork. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This house needed some character," she said, as if her unsolicited redecorating was a gift. "You'll thank me later." Anger bubbled within me, but I swallowed it down. Instead, I stormed into the kitchen and waited for Edward to come home. When he arrived, I confronted him, hoping this time he'd understand. "She can't just come in here and change everything," I said, barely keeping my voice steady. "This is my house, Edward. She's crossing boundaries." But Edward, as always, dismissed my concerns. "She's just trying to help," he repeated, his tone growing irritated. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" Each time he chose her over me, a little piece of my trust in him eroded. The house that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a battleground. Jennifer's presence turned my dream home into a nightmare. Each day brought a new intrusion, and every attempt I made to assert my boundaries was met with resistance, not just from her, but from Edward as well. It was as though I no longer existed as an individual. I was merely a prop in their twisted vision of family unity. Her criticisms escalated from passive-aggressive remarks to outright declarations. One evening, while flipping through a financial magazine that had featured an article about my career, Jennifer looked up and said, "Investment analysts don't really build anything, do they? It's not like you're adding value to people's lives." The sting of her words was sharp, but I refused to let her see how much they affected me. Instead, I held my head high, masking my hurt with defiance. Edward, as usual, sat silently beside her, scrolling through his phone as if none of this were happening. I wanted to scream, to demand that he stand up for me, but I knew it was pointless. Each time I tried to confront him about her behavior, his response was the same. "You're overreacting. She's just trying to help." One day, I came home to find Jennifer rifling through my personal files. Confidential work documents, financial statements, and even my medical records were spread across the coffee table like they were her property. "What are you doing?" I demanded, snatching the papers out of her hands. Jennifer didn't even flinch. "I'm organizing things," she said, as if that made it acceptable. "You've been so busy, and someone needs to keep things in order." "These are my private files," I shouted, my voice trembling with anger. "You have no right to touch them." Instead of apologizing, she sighed dramatically, as if I were the unreasonable one. "I'm just trying to help Laura. You should be grateful." When Edward arrived home later that evening, I confronted him once again, my frustration boiling over. "She went through my personal files, Edward. This has to stop," I said, tears threatening to spill over. He pinched the bridge of his nose, his expression one of exhaustion. "Laura, she's just trying to make things easier for us. Why do you always assume the worst about her?" The betrayal in his words cut deeper than any of Jennifer's actions. My husband, the man who had vowed to love and protect me, was siding with the person who was actively dismantling my life. The final straw came when I returned home after an exhausting day at work to find the nursery, my sanctuary for the baby I was carrying, completely transformed. The sleek, modern crib I had chosen was gone, replaced by a bulky wooden one that Jennifer deemed more sturdy. The soft pastel walls I had painted were now a dull beige, and the delicate curtains had been swapped out for heavy drapes that blocked the light. "What have you done?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "This is what's best for the baby," Jennifer said, her tone dripping with superiority. "You'd understand if you weren't so focused on your career." "This is my baby," I shot back. "You don't get to make these decisions." Jennifer's expression turned icy. "I'm the grandmother. I know what's best better than you do." I turned to Edward, desperate for support. "Do you hear her? She's crossing every boundary." But his response was predictable and infuriating. She's just excited, Laura. Why can't you let her be involved? His words felt like a slap in the face. I realized then that I was truly alone in this battle. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every corner of my home, once my sanctuary, now felt like a prison. Edward's refusal to stand up for me, combined with Jennifer's relentless interference, left me feeling trapped. I tried to focus on the joy of my pregnancy, but even that was overshadowed by their control. The breaking point came one fateful evening, and it changed everything. I arrived home after another grueling day at work, my mind preoccupied with the nursery. I planned to reclaim at least that space, undoing Jennifer's changes and making it a haven for my baby. But as I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. The house was eerily quiet. Edward and Jennifer were waiting in the living room, a stack of papers sitting ominously on the coffee table. Their expressions were cold and calculated. "What's this?" I asked, my voice wary. Edward stood and handed me the stack of papers. "It's time to sign over the house, Laura." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "Excuse me? This house is mine. I'm not signing anything." Jennifer leaned back in her chair, her smug smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You're being unreasonable, Laura. Think of the family." "My answer is no," I said firmly, my heart pounding. Edward's expression darkened, and he stepped closer to me. "You don't get to decide that. This isn't just about you. I worked for this house, Edward. This is my home, my legacy. You can't just take it from me." My voice trembled with anger, but I refused to back down. Jennifer rose to her feet, her calm facade cracking. "You're being selfish, Laura. It's time you learned that this family doesn't revolve around you." Before I could respond, Edward grabbed my arm. His grip was firm, and panic surged through me. "Let go of me," I shouted, struggling against him. Ignoring my protests, Edward and Jennifer dragged me outside to the large oak tree in the backyard. The bark of the ancient tree gleamed in the moonlight, a haunting backdrop to their sinister intentions. Jennifer pulled out a bundle of ropes, as if this had all been premeditated. "Edward, stop this. Please," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. They forced me against the rough bark of the tree, tying my wrists and ankles tightly. The ropes bit into my skin, leaving raw marks as I struggled against them. "This is for your own good," Jennifer said coldly, handing Edward a cricket bat. "Maybe this will teach her to see reason." Fear gripped me as Edward took the bat in his hands, his knuckles turning white. "Edward, think about the baby," I cried, desperation lacing my voice. He hesitated for a moment, but then his expression hardened. "You brought this on yourself, Laura." The first swing connected with my arm, sending a jolt of pain through me. "Sign the papers, Laura," he demanded. "No," I said through gritted teeth, refusing to give in. His frustration boiled over. The next swing was harder, the bat striking the side of my head. Pain exploded and my vision blurred. The world spun around me, and I fought to stay conscious. "Edward, stop! You're going to hurt her," a voice called out from the darkness. I turned my head slightly, straining to see the source of the voice. It was a neighbor, drawn by the commotion. The sight of someone witnessing my nightmare brought a flicker of hope. Edward and Jennifer froze, exchanging panicked glances. "We need to get out of here," Jennifer hissed, pulling Edward toward the house. As they retreated, I used every ounce of strength I had to loosen the ropes around my wrists. The pain in my head throbbed, but I refused to give up. My hands finally broke free, and I quickly untied my ankles, stumbling away from the tree. The neighbor rushed to my side, his face etched with concern. "Are you okay? What happened?" he asked. "Please call the police," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. The flashing red and blue lights of police cars illuminated the yard as officers arrived minutes later. I stood on the sidewalk, trembling but determined, as I recounted the horrifying ordeal to them. The neighbor who had intervened corroborated my story, describing the scene he had witnessed with clear detail. As the officers approached the house, Edward and Jennifer emerged from the doorway, their expressions a mix of defiance and panic. When confronted with the accusations, Edward sneered. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said, his voice oozing false confidence. Jennifer, ever the manipulator, played the victim. "She's been hysterical lately," she claimed, her voice calm yet condescending. "We were just trying to talk sense into her." But the evidence spoke for itself. The rope still hung from the oak tree, and the cricket bat lay discarded on the ground. Photos of the bruises on my arms and the swelling on my head were taken as evidence. The officers didn't buy their excuses. "Edward William and Jennifer William, you are under arrest for assault and coercion," one of the officers said, pulling out handcuffs. Edward's smug facade cracked as he protested, but it was no use. They were both led away, their wrists bound, as I watched with a mixture of relief and disbelief. That night, I packed a bag and left the house that had been both my sanctuary and my battleground. My parents welcomed me into their home with open arms. Their warmth and love wrapped around me like a shield, offering the safety I so desperately needed. "You're not alone, Laura," my father said, his voice steady. A retired firefighter with a lifetime of strength and compassion, he became my rock in the days that followed. My mother, ever the nurturer, made sure I rested and ate, reminding me that I needed to focus on my health, for myself and for the baby. "You've been through so much," my mother said, her eyes glistening with tears. "But you're strong, sweetheart. You'll get through this." I also reached out to Lisa Carter, my college friend and a brilliant attorney. When I explained what had happened, she didn't hesitate. "We're going to make this right, Laura," she said firmly. "Gather every piece of evidence you have, messages, voicemails, anything that shows their abuse. We'll take them to court." Over the next few weeks, Lisa and I worked tirelessly to build a solid case. The evidence was damning: photographic evidence, images of the injuries I sustained during the attack, physical evidence, the ropes, cricket bat, and statements from the officers who had arrested Edward and Jennifer. Witness testimony, the neighbor's detailed account of what he had witnessed. Documentation, text messages, voicemails, and financial records that highlighted Edward and Jennifer's manipulative tactics. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture of their abuse and coercion. Lisa's confidence and unwavering support bolstered my resolve. "We're going to ensure they face the full weight of the law," she assured me. The day of the trial arrived, and I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding. My hands trembled slightly, but Lisa's calm presence reassured me. "This is your moment, Laura," she said firmly. "You fought so hard to get here. Trust the evidence." The courtroom was packed, with Edward and Jennifer seated at the defense table. Edward's smug demeanor had returned, though it was tinged with unease. Jennifer's expression was a mask of indifference, though her tightly clasped hands betrayed her nerves. I took a deep breath, determined to face them with strength. Lisa began her opening statement with precision and authority. "Your Honor, this is not merely a property dispute. This case is about coercion, emotional and physical abuse, and the betrayal of trust against a pregnant woman who deserved safety and respect. The evidence will show that these defendants engaged in calculated actions to strip Laura Jacob of her dignity, safety, and rightful property." The judge listened intently, nodding occasionally as Lisa laid out the key points of our case. The evidence we had meticulously prepared was presented with clarity: photos and physical evidence. The judge reviewed images of my injuries, alongside the ropes and cricket bat used in the assault. The officer who recovered these items testified about their findings. Witness testimony. The neighbor who had intervened detailed what he had seen that night, painting a vivid picture of Edward and Jennifer's actions. Digital evidence. Text messages and voicemails revealed Edward and Jennifer's manipulative attempts to pressure me into signing over the house. The defense tried to discredit me, claiming I was exaggerating and difficult to live with. But Lisa was relentless, countering every argument with undeniable facts. "The evidence speaks for itself," she stated confidently. When it was my turn to testify, I stepped up to the stand, taking a moment to steady my nerves. I described everything: the months of Jennifer's interference, Edward's betrayal, and the horrifying night they tied me to the tree. "This wasn't just about a house," I said, my voice clear despite the lump in my throat. "They tried to take my home, my safety, and my sense of self. I endured months of emotional abuse, but when I stood my ground, they resorted to violence. I fought back because I had to, because I'm fighting for myself and my unborn child." The courtroom was silent as I spoke, and for the first time, I saw cracks in Edward's confident facade. Jennifer looked down, her hands trembling slightly. Edward and Jennifer's testimonies were riddled with contradictions. Edward claimed he had acted out of frustration, while Jennifer insisted she was only trying to help. Lisa tore their statements apart during cross-examination, highlighting their inconsistencies and selfish motives. In her closing argument, Lisa addressed the court with unwavering conviction. "Your Honor, Laura Jacob has shown extraordinary resilience in the face of unimaginable betrayal. The evidence proves that these defendants acted with malice and intent to harm. Justice demands that they be held accountable for their actions." After hours of deliberation, the judge returned with her decision. She addressed the courtroom with firm resolve. "Based on the evidence presented, this court finds Edward William and Jennifer William guilty of coercion, assault, and emotional abuse. Their actions were deliberate, malicious, and unacceptable." The judge announced their sentences. Edward William, jail sentence, 2 years in prison for his role in the assault and coercion. Financial penalty, a fine of $150,000 to compensate for the physical and emotional damages caused to Laura. Mandatory rehabilitation, required counseling for anger management and coercive behavior. Jennifer William, probation, 1 year of probation. Community service, 300 hours for her involvement in the abuse. Financial penalty, a fine of $75,000. Restraining orders. Both Edward and Jennifer were issued lifelong restraining orders, prohibiting them from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my property. As Edward and Jennifer were escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. For months, they had tried to take everything from me, but today the law had held them accountable. Lisa turned to me, her expression filled with pride. "You did it, Laura. Justice has been served." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded. "Thank you, Lisa. I couldn't have done this without you." Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't known in months. The fear and betrayal that had weighed so heavily on me were replaced with hope and determination. My parents were waiting outside, their faces beaming with pride and relief. "You're so strong, Laura," my father said, wrapping me in a tight hug. "We're proud of you." My mother held my hand and whispered, "You've been through so much, but this is a new beginning for you and your baby." Returning to my house was bittersweet. It had been my sanctuary once, and I was determined to make it so again. The first step was removing every trace of Jennifer's interference. The bulky furniture she had brought in was sold, and I replaced it with pieces that reflected my style, bright, modern, and inviting. The nursery became my favorite project. I replaced the outdated crib Jennifer had imposed with the sleek, safe design I had originally chosen. The pastel walls were repainted, and I added cheerful touches like soft curtains, playful artwork, and a rocking chair in the corner. The room transformed into a space of love and hope, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had once overshadowed it. Throughout this journey, my parents were my rock. My father, with his calm strength, helped with the renovations, while my mother made sure I was well fed and rested. "You need to focus on the joy ahead," she said, her nurturing voice reminding me of the brighter future I was building. Lisa, my attorney and dear friend, continued to offer support. One afternoon, as we sipped tea in my newly redecorated living room, she smiled. "What's next for you, Laura?" I thought about her question and felt a sense of clarity. I want to keep growing in my career and maybe start my own real estate consulting firm one day. But for now, my focus is on being the best mom I can be. Lisa nodded with a proud grin. "You're going to do amazing things, Laura." As the weeks turned into months, I felt more prepared than ever to embrace motherhood. My parents eagerly stepped into their roles as soon-to-be grandparents, doting on me and helping with preparations. My father even built a custom bookshelf for the nursery, filling it with books he had once read to me as a child. One evening, I sat in the rocking chair in the nursery, my hand resting on my growing belly. The room was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of a crescent moon-shaped nightlight. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We've been through so much, but we made it. I promise, I'll give you a life filled with love, strength, and happiness." While I rebuilt my life, Edward and Jennifer faced the consequences of their actions. Edward lost his job as a software engineer after word of his conviction spread, leaving him financially ruined. Jennifer, once so confident in her social standing, found herself ostracized by her peers. The hefty fines they owed me compounded their struggles, ensuring they couldn't easily recover. The restraining orders ensured I would never have to face them again. Knowing they were legally bound to stay away from me brought a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The courtroom victory marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. I wasn't just reclaiming my home, I was reclaiming my life. Every step I took toward rebuilding was a reminder of my resilience and strength. My career, which I had temporarily paused during the court proceedings, welcomed me back with open arms. My colleagues, inspired by my story, supported me as I regained my footing. And while I looked forward to continuing my professional journey, my most important role lay ahead, being a mother. Sitting in the nursery one quiet evening, I reflected on everything I had been through. The house that had once been a battleground was now a sanctuary again, a symbol of hope and a future full of possibilities. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. This was my story, one of resilience, strength, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. The road hadn't been easy, but I had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever came next. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more captivating stories. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue creating content you love. Stay tuned for the next one, and as always, thank you for being a part of our journey.